Hello and good morning here in my game room. I have been very excited about this game, Ker Nethalas, and I wanted to start playing some of it to show you all how it feels and what it's about. This first video, I want to make just an introduction just to get anyone who's curious about what the game is even about and how one plays a game like this looks like. And so we're not actually going to play in this session. I'm going to do a little just brief overview of the contents of this book, sort of how I hope to play it. There's still, one of the best things about RPGs and solo RPGs is you watch so many different people's YouTube channels and you'll see, an infinitely different number of ways in which they decide to flesh out from the core of the game itself. But what's wonderful about this game is it has such a solid, strong core of game mechanics, the game loop, the author. So first of all, I just want to call out from Black Oath Entertainment, we have Alex T. The author Alex T has designed so many wonderful games. He even described this one as more of a board game in a sense than just like a narrative adventure. There is certainly lore and story to be told within these pages, but what's really cool is that it focuses so strongly on the fundamentals of a board game, basically. That as you'll see, like as somebody who enjoys the crunchiness and the excitement of exploring, looting, leveling up, fighting more, stronger, and different varieties of bad guys. This book has it all. And then, of course, there are the supplements, which I own both the first and second issue of the zines for. There's even more planned material in this world of Ker Nethalas coming out. But this core game, Into the Midnight Throne, is just fantastic. Currently, we're in August, towards the end of August of 2024, and it is my game of the year. For me, I've played several really good games that have been strong contenders for that category, but I foresee, if the next few months left in this year don't change, that this will be my 2024 game of the year. So took a sip of coffee. Cheers to all of you morning gamers out there. And in case you forget what you're drinking, it's right there on the cup. So I'm going to get started here, kind of going over the brief overview of what is in the book when you get Ker Nethalas, and then sort of how I, again, will hopefully put out a couple videos on gameplay if things are going well, and smoothly in terms of streaming it. I'd love to stream, as much as I can. So what is Ker Nethalas? Let's just go straight to, what I love about this game is that it's very, I devoured it. It's very, it's 223 pages. So let's take a look together at the table of contents. And I devoured it and got to playing very quickly. So what's nice is that Alex has created just a lot of material and tables and things to flesh out your game. But once you learn the basics of the rules, you really can just get started. And certainly I look up still so much of what, if I have a question, I'll go to the Discord. Alex is very responsive, and so are the other gamers. You've got a community to just quickly get answers to any rules questions that come up. But the book itself is really well laid out and explained. And what's great is, like I said, you could jump into gaming within the day. I think you will need repetition. You will need reps to feel very comfortable to quickly grab which dice pool you need to grab to start rolling your door checks, your combat checks, your encounters, your events. Just going through the flow chart, which I'm going to share with you some fan-made material that really helps make that easier. So let's just get started on what's in this book. So Into the Midnight Throne, you'll have this whole chapter here on making a character. This is what's so cool, is there are 20 different types of masteries, and masteries, really, every time you run this game, you can have a unique build of your character. And we're going to go into my character sheet here in a little bit on the specifics, but the build of your character really gives you access to different masteries. And you might be a sorcerer, you might be more of a melee fighter, whatever you end up deciding I have 3 masteries here, and you can level them up. There's different tiers as you get experience points or find items in the dungeons. Your character just gets cooler and cooler, but also, mind you, the bosses and the baddies get harder as well. They scale with you. So this game really just, and the idea is you're just trying to run through these dungeons, and you're creating them, you're generating these dungeons to explore and fight enemies and find loot. Everybody's dungeon is going to look and feel different, just because the tables you're rolling on. But it's exciting because you want to see how far you can take your character. I've got this character, her name is Xylia. She's still level 1 right now, but she's well on her way. She's got, XP that she's completed the first introductory domain, and we're on a domain that we're creating ourselves. So chapter that first, second chapter technically, but this is all dedicated towards building a character that you want to take and run through the dungeon and into the Midnight Throne. And so we'll go over just quickly, all these different types. But, for example, I'm a Weapon Master Wrathspawn as an initial combo. And then I found an amulet after killing the first boss of the dungeon level 1 that gave me access to the Iron Collar on the amulet. So that lets me, I can spend Aether, which is like magic, to cast, to start doing some healing. And then I can eventually use that magic to call up, I'm sure, other attacks and spells that'll be useful. So I started off as a melee fighter who really didn't have access to their magic Aether side, and I wasn't really leaning into upping those skill points. But now I have reason to, with my third mastery of Iron Collar. So what's really cool is over the course of your run, you can also swap these out. If you find access to different masteries as amulets, you can wear different mastery amulets at different times to keep your character build fresh. But you really are, you start the game. I just rolled on a D20 table to pick which one the game wanted to give me for my character. I didn't know enough of the game yet to be specific enough about which character type I wanted. Then, of course, the rules from page 63 to 81 goes over combat, healing death, conditions, exhaustion, sanity, companions and minions, and there is a co-op mode. I think that this is designed, with solo players in mind, but it's cool that anytime you have a solo game, it can also be played cooperatively if you'd like to do that. We're not going to go over all the details of the rules. I'm just going to give just a brief overview of the gameplay, but there's obviously about 20 solid pages of rules here. But that's what's really cool is you've got all these pages dedicated to building your character. Then you have, this of course is important, you got 20 pages of the core rules, and then you still have to know how to run the game and run this next chapter, Exploring Ker Nethalas, from pages 83 to 112, are going over how to use your torch and light source, how to draw the maps that you're generating on the random tables, how to scavenge for loot, how to open these doors, because each room will have a variable number of access points in and out, and you have to check them for traps, and if they're locked, and if you don't have a thief toolkit to unlock the pick the lock, you have to use an athletics check to bash it down, and if you fail, there are consequences. There's so much cool stuff going on. Found this. Also, you get to use freaking mechanical pencils and pen and paper again. How cool is that? Like, I just nerd out, and you get to roll chunky dice. So we'll go over, briefly how these skill checks work, but you're doing like these dice rolls and for opposing checks against enemies and such. So there's a lot going on with when you're diving into how to explore the world. But that adds another like solid 20, 30 pages here to the rules in a sense. But then after that, you get into basically, this is all chapter 5 going over all the enemies, and if you look at just the variety of enemies, you flip to this page and you roll, for example, if you do end up landing that you entered a dungeon room with some bad guys, this is all the details on how you will fight them. So this is each page is dedicated to one monster. And again, they are adaptable to your level. And then the zine includes some really fun rules. If you roll like a critical, 20, on a D20 that you rolled like a very like unique high level monster, you take each of these and they get unique abilities or level ups to make them unique, like kind of like powered up monsters because you rolled, a specific 1 out of 20 chance per monster encounter. There's so many things that add variety to this game. And so once you get through all the different types of enemies, which again, the zines will include some extra baddies to play with as well. And we're not going to dive super deep into all the different stats and actions and the way that combat works in this video. You'll see a little bit more hopefully when I record a gameplay session. You then have the boss of the layer of the domain, and these are the overseers. Now, every time you roll to generate a new domain, you roll for the type of monster that you'll encounter at the final stage of that in the boss room, if you will. You also roll for, there's a table that each of these monsters will have a D10 different type of effect on all the minions or smaller creatures in their domain. So this might be things like my first domain, they were resistant to necrotic type damage. So they got extra bonuses if I tried to do a certain kind of damage to them. They could just be a number of different things influenced by the overseer. Once you topple the overseer in the domain, though, they lose that influence from the overseer. So that's really cool. So here are some examples. We have the Infernal Tormentor. We have the Zephyrus Shadow. We have the Carnage Devourer, the Venom Cloud Siren. The Glacial Burrower is my current overseer for the new domain I just mapped up. So I rolled that we would have a Glacial Burrower, and then I'm just checking my notes here for what his influence is. So the Glacial Burrower, he rolled that he's going to have Mage Bane, so plus 10 magical resistance to all enemies under the Glacial Burrower's domain. So until I take down first you have to find the Glacial Burrower. So you're rolling a dice constantly to check if you've found his room. And there's a really cool system of like a cooldown dice that just goes and drops from a D8 to a D6 to a D4. And every time you're rolling the check, you're trying to roll a 1 or a 2 to drop it to that next dice level down. When you finally get to that bottom level dice and you roll the 1 or 2, you have found your overseer while you're exploring the domain. And you have the option of engaging in a battle with him, which of course is going to be just this massive epic fight because these overseers are fleshed out really nicely. You have the Gore Hoof, you have the Veil Shifter. This was my first domain fight. I rolled up the Infernal Archon. So the very first time you run through a character, they always run through in the story that they landed, story-wise in the lore in this first domain. And so you make your way, and it's a pre-scripted domain. The zines have a couple extra levels like this where you can run through pre-scripted domains rather than rolling and generating your own dungeons. But you can see I marked up my pathway through this dungeon. I was exploring rooms, corridors, doing door checks, each of these doors that are labeled here. So you get this first kind of intro level dungeon. You can optionally choose to, each room lets you do a standard thing where you're finding your first weapon. You're getting a little bit of supplies and crafting and cooking supplies. That's another really cool thing about this game is that there's camping and there's crafting and there's whole items and potions and all kinds of tables that you can roll on. And eventually you get to the end of this intro domain. You fight the overseer, down at the bottom of the dungeon, or you can choose to skip him if you don't want to. And as you're going through the rooms, you're scavenging and hopefully looting them. And then you exit and you start your own very first unique domain, which is where I rolled for the Glacial Burrower we talked about. So I was able to defeat this Infernal Archon. It was a magical battle. This guy was summoning up his own little demons. He was out there. And this is what's going to be really fun when you play RPGs in games, of your own. You can use whatever, kit bashing, whatever minis you have. This is from Descent, the board game. And, something like this, you could throw him into the room with you visually on the table as you're rolling and battling and narrating. I hope to use some these are like Rory story cubes to kind of narrate some events that'll happen throughout some of the exploring and battles. So there's all kinds of ways you can take a game like this and then adapt it to, if you enjoy more narration, you can add more narrative elements. There's so many fundamental core rules in here that already give you story and action and animation that you don't have to. I think my goal is that once I get comfortable enough with the rules that I'd want to sprinkle in some more role playing in a sense. But you could honestly play this game strictly almost like a really fun and competitive, not competitive, but challenging board game for solo play or co-op. So that is sort of the big picture of what's in this book. And let's just quickly do the intro to the Midnight Throne to see, so you can know what you're dealing with in this sort of dark fantasy world. Welcome to Ker Nethalas, Into the Midnight Throne, a single-player dungeon crawler set in an endless necropolis. With the help of this book, you'll tell the story of your character, who, after miraculously surviving an execution, wakes up to realize that their problems have just begun and that there are fates worse than death. So you basically wake up in this corpse pile. You've been, in my character, I rolled that Xylia was charged for treason in the society above, in the world above here. So Ker Nethalas is the necropolis below the city. And we're trying to figure out what the heck is going on down here, this ancient old ruins beneath the city that's full of, evil and the undead and all kinds of things that have been locked away from, supposedly locked away from the people above. But you are, they were trying to execute Xylia for treason, and she woke up. She wasn't fully killed. She woke up and she was like, holy shit, I'm still alive. And she's trying to find her way out of this underworld, this underbelly of the city. So, that's sort of the big picture of the game. I'm going to look at my character sheet. And of course, these are all the, we were talking about the masteries that I rolled on to build your character. I ended up rolling on, luckily they both were in the W's. So I rolled Weapon Master and Wrath Spawn. So you immediately gain access to a passive ability and a tier 1 ability for each type. So Weapon Master, of course, had a really, and then of course there's these stories, this lore behind, where did I train, which is really cool to combine that with the where did I train on Ratspawn and kind of come up with a story for Xylia. She was trained, I have these notes down on my, RPG sheets, but basically she was trained in a temple. So she was charged with treason. She studied in the great libraries. She studied, she went and trained with monks in the temples, and then she's a very hot-headed character. Some other cool things is that gets introduced in the zines is the idea of flaws and merits. So I rolled that she is a lucky character, so she has a lot of luck. That grants her some once per domain benefits. But unfortunately, she has a fragile mind. So despite training with the monks and the temples, there's some story there behind why her sanity got cracked a little bit. And sanity is something that allows you to survive the underbelly of the necropolis. And so she started with a lower sanity than average for her role. She also suffered a damaged nerve as one of her flaws, so she has a lower acrobatics score for acrobatics checks, but she is eagle-eyed, so her perception checks are higher. So, there's a really cool way to really make each of these characters your own. So you can already see by combining, starting 2 masteries that were rolled, and then I rolled on flaws and merits, and I rolled on the table of her story, of where she trained, you're already off to the races so quickly with a very unique build every time you play this game. Now, you don't have to roll. You could say, I want to build a Zealot Stormbrand or a Mindbender Frostweaver. The Frostweavers are immune to cold type damages, and they shoot frost bolts for the cost of magic. So you're building like a wizard or sorcerer. Super freaking cool. So after you've done, running through how to build the character, you get to read about how the game is played. And I think that would be a little bit too much for me to do all the rules in this one video. So we're going to move on to just seeing some of the helpful player aids and sheets that will go along with the game. And I think that, as I play the game, that'll hopefully give a good idea of what's going on with gameplay. I don't think that going through all the, how to play on this video or a gameplay video would be as helpful as just hopefully, you guys getting the big picture and then learning it for yourself. And you can see, I spent, obviously hours kind of getting through the book and labeling each of the things, because there's a very helpful, you'll keep referencing these tables. There's an index of tables. So for example, if I'm in battle and I did really well on a combat roll, so I get a defensive move, so I can go look up, the defensive table to what my benefit is for defending well. Let's say I found some, magical items and I need to roll to see what kind of properties they have. There's some magic item tables. There's all kinds of tables in here. And that's what Alex does an amazing job with Ker Nethalas. And also, to be honest, I've already purchased another book of his, Ruthless Heaven's Boundless Fate, which is another kind of sci-fi RPG game, and it's just, he does a fantastic job with just fleshing out the tables and enjoying the world that he's created. So let's look at the character sheet for Xylia. So your character will have health and toughness. So before you take damage to health, you get to, work through the toughness, and then your health is harder to both damage but also recover. So toughness gets healed after each battle by 1d4. And it's easier to heal your toughness, in camping and resting situations. Health is a little bit harder to manage, so you want to try and, rest and recover as much as you can, but there's also, if you camp too often, there are downsides to that as well. So it's a nice balance in the game of running through the dungeon. Then the Aether is your magic ability. Different abilities will cost you certain amounts of Aether. She starts with 12 Aether is what I rolled up for her character. And then her sanity, again, she's doing okay in the dungeon so far. She's at 10 out of 12, but if you get too low in your sanity, you can die from going insane. Magic resistance, of course, when you're fighting magical beasts, you need a 20 is not super high, but we've also just started the game, so we haven't had a chance to really choose to level that up too much. Your light source, you kind of tick it down. I kind of fill in the boxes when I have them and erase each light source. Every time you go into a room, you need to have access to torches, candles, lamps, lamp oils, whatever, to keep the rooms lit, right? So, for example, as I'm crawling through my current domain with the what do they call it? The frickety frack, the glacial burrower. Sorry, I've barely started this dungeon, so I have not met him yet, thankfully. I have not found the glacial burrower. But as I'm crawling through these first few rooms of the glacial burrower's domain, I have to tick down the light source each time I move to the next room. And if you don't, you get blinded, and then you can start suffering damage in different ways from not having the light source. So you need to either find some new crafting ways to craft torches, or you will be, in the dark, which is already making your crawl much harder. So in the beginning, you also craft a character. It walks you through how you assign. You get to choose how you want to build out all these skill checks, which will get used in different ways through events. In a room, when you enter a room of Ker Nethalas, you roll a d20. One of the steps. There's several steps. There's door checks. There's different things you're doing. But the big picture is you go into a room and you're either going to find a bad guy or you're going to have an event. Events are going to be narrative, but they'll still have you check against skills. An encounter can still have skill checks within them. In terms of a combat encounter, the enemy might do something that you had to dodge, or you had to do an acrobatics check maybe. But those are the two kind of pathways for each room, and you roll a d20. So within a room, when you roll a d20, a 10 or greater will get you a combat, and if you don't hit that, then you have to roll on the event table. So either way, something is going to happen in each room, right? So either you're fighting a bad guy or you're experiencing some sort of underworld dark event that you're going to have to deal with, like you would in an RPG. You're not just getting off scot-free. Now sometimes you'll get into a positive event, which will be like, oh, you found a bunch of loot, or somehow if you roll on one of these skill checks, you can do something. I went into a room the other day that had a shrine that I had the option to boost my temporarily boost a skill for scavenging or something, I think it was. But basically you had to trade. You had to give some sort of property, like of your character's toughness or sanity. I think it was sanity potentially, as an offering to this dark demon altar to get a temporary boost that you roll for how many rooms you get this boosted skill check or something. It was along those lines. It's really cool and creative how you're going to have all these random sort of events throughout the world beneath the city. So yeah, that's the basic summary of what you're doing as you're crawling through the rooms and why these skills matter. So you assign the skills in terms of a starting build. They'll give you X amount of points, and you get to distribute them as you will. You also get these personal goals, which makes it really fun. There's a list of personal goals. I already completed my first personal goal of defeating the Overseer, which gave me the access to the third mastery, which was recommended in the book that you do that. So now I'm working on dealing 200 piercing damage and successfully scavenging 100 rooms. So again, my scavenge check is 30, for example. So when I complete a room after you've done the combat encounter or the event, whatever's going on, you've checked doors for traps, you've resolved whether you're breaking down traps or picking the lock on a door, all the things that you want to do around you. You can also scavenge each room once, and that's why you'll notice I actually have marked. I've marked on my map that I put the S to say that I've tried to scavenge it. Whether I was successful or not, it's more important that I just remember that it's been attempted, because it would be so broken if you could just keep rolling this dice to keep scavenging it. You might as well just get infinite amounts of materials and supplies. So with a scavenge ability of 30 currently, if I roll a D100, nice, that's a 10 plus a 2, so that's a 12. So you're rolling under the 30. So I would have successfully scavenged. And then there'd be a table to say what I found. I'd roll on that table. And obviously the higher you roll on those tables, generally the better the thing you get. So if I do that successfully 100 times, then on a personal goal, I would be able to unlock a really cool permanent ability, and then I could move on to a new personal goal. Now, these are designed to be very, you know, take a lot of time. You can't just scavenge. I mean, going through 100 rooms alone is hard enough, and then trying to successfully scavenge them, you can see you 30% of the time you scavenge successfully. So it's going to take a long time to unlock that ability, which is why it's really cool. These are like long-term goals, personal goals of your hero that you can pick. We've already kind of talked about masteries. So just quickly, my tiers that I have access to in Weapon Master is, buffs for a certain weapon that I've equipped, a Pilum, which again is a piercing type weapon. So I'm trying to deal piercing damage. So a Pilum, I actually had to Google what that looked like, but it's a really cool, like shafted, long kind of weapon. I've got this other, for one action point, I can do an evasive strike, which is, basically allowing me to both fight while beginning defensive on my next turn, versus like this first passive ability is basically just buffing my damage. So I can choose to do an evasive strike as well for an action point, which would buff my next defensive ability. Or I can choose an action point under Wrath Spawn, and I can choose to bash, which means I'm not getting defensive boosts, I'm getting damage boosts if I hit. So you have to obviously roll to hit, and then you roll for damage. So with a bash, I'm getting less defensive, I'm getting more aggressive. Now this was a cool tier I unlocked called Sweeping Blow. So I noticed that there were some groups of enemies you'll fight, like a group of rats in the first domain. So I decided to spend an ability point. I rolled on I got super lucky and unlocked this really amazing relic that I ate. Basically, I ate this seed. If you guys know Elden Ring, I've been playing some Elden Ring lately, and I ate basically like a golden seed kind of thing that unlocked an ability point that I could spend for getting a new tier of my mastery. So Sweeping Blow seemed really useful because when you fight groups of enemies, you can do this attack which swipes all enemies in melee range. So now I have the ability to not just be attacking these rats one at a time. And generally when the game is throwing multiple enemies at you, each enemy is not as strong, but it's still nice to have a way to clear enemies together in a big sweeping blow. So if I were to choose to do this, then of course I wouldn't be getting the defensive bonus or the damage boost, but I'd be able to attack multiple enemies at once. Very cool. Now this is the cool one with Iron Collar. I have this ability to start generating these totems using magic power and Aether. And basically I can start healing myself, spending Aether with these icons. So it has this like animation for you to kind of visualize of, every time you're casting spells, it gives you, of course, the animation of it. And these icons are placed on the battlefield, and enemies cannot directly attack your icons, but they can get destroyed. And so once per round, you're getting healed by 2 toughness. You and all friendly characters are getting healed by 2 toughness per round. If you spend 10 Aether, and it costs you your turn, your action point to place this restoring icon. So 1 AP I signified for me to say that, well, that's my action for the round. I don't get a chance to swipe at the enemy or bash at the enemy or attack the enemy. I'm basically doing a healing maneuver. And with the Iron Collar, as I unlock more tiers, I'll get access to more types of icons to place on the battlefield. So enemy area effects can destroy the icons, is what I've noted here. And you can only have 1 max per type of icon, and you can only have 2 icons on the field at any one time. So there's going to be probably some, I'm assuming some I haven't spoiled the surprise for myself, but when I level up, there might be both a healing type and a damage type icon that attacks the enemy. So really fun to play with and see what ends up popping up here. But also, it takes an action point to place 1 icon. So, something to think about on your turn. So here I've got a combat worksheet. The flow of combat, hopefully when I record a gameplay, will be, more demonstrated through that. But there's a lot going on in combat, which makes it crunchy and unique, I think, but also quick. You can roll up these dice, and once you get the flow of it, and as long as you're tracking all the different modifiers and defensive maneuvers and what's going on, it takes a little bit of work, but the more reps, like I said, the more fun it gets over time. And I think having a little combat sheet for me as a newbie to the game was really helpful. And a lot of the community content that's been put out has been really helpful. So I highly recommend going to, Black Oath has a Discord for the game where people are asking questions again and sharing materials like this. So these community content is really, really nice to learn the game with. And of course, Alex shared these player sheets as well. When you buy the game as a physical copy, you can also get access to the PDF And the PDF comes zipped with a bunch of player sheets and things for you to print out to help you track your stuff. So here, for example, I've got some equipped gear. I've got armor on my arms currently from a vambrace. When you put on certain types of armor, it does inhibit it gives -5 to, this one gives -5 to maneuvers. So acrobatics, dodge, and stealth, kind of down by 5. But on the flip side, it protects you from damage that's incoming. That's melee damage, not magic damage. And then each time you get, usage out of your vambrace, so say a freaking, I don't know, spider monkey jumps at my arm and tries to bite it and claws at it, and my vambrace protected me for that turn. So it's been used in battle. So what's really cool is that there is, there's a durability behind this. So you have to roll at the end of battle, whether you're tracking it with a dice. So my vambrace has a certain durability that over time it's going to be needing to get repaired. So a very cool mechanic for, you don't just get to use this forever for free. And then of course I'm tracking, how much money I have, crafting supplies, cooking supplies, which can all generate you new items and gear. I've got candles, I've got bedrolls, I've got an unknown potion. I still need to unlock a random potion. I've got a torch and amulets, things like that. I might need to kind of do some upkeep on the gear section from my last session, but that's basically what I had up until that point, at least. And then here are some notes. You can use for damage, vulnerabilities, resistances. Here's where you can track the dice that tells you if you're going to get growing darkness in the dungeon. So the longer you stay in the dungeon, the longer the tension builds and more bad things happen. So again, you roll a D8 to start, and if you hit a 1 or 2, then you downgrade to a D6. You keep rolling every room that you move into. You'll roll the D6 until you hit a 1 or 2. Now you're downgraded to a D4. Now every time you move into a new room, you're rolling a D4. If you hit a 1 or 2, now you roll on the growing darkness table. So that domain will be manipulated and worsened for you permanently, and you restart the tension die kind of thing. And then the layered domain exit, this is how you try and get out. This is how you find the exit or the boss, the same concept of a usage die. So I've just started this domain, so luckily we're still, we started the D8. This D10 in parentheses is to indicate that you could unlock, I guess there's some ways to unlock a D10 tension die, but you're in parentheses here, you're supposed to start, I think, at the D8. So I still luckily have not dropped down to have any active growing dark events yet. I'm also very fresh into the dungeon domain. For the Glacial Burrower, who is, obviously I'm not a magic type yet, but if I started investing in magic abilities, this domain would make it harder for me because every enemy would get +10 to their magic resistance. So yeah, and here's some flowcharts that kind of go over, again, community content that's been shared. Some of this, I think this might have come directly from Alex's PDF, just to kind of help you figure out, okay, so the order of events, if I'm going into a room, what happens? If I'm going into a corridor, what happens? If you go into a room, there's either an encounter or event. Corridors, you're checking for encounters or events in a different type of role. So again, lots to keep track of. This kind of goes through a little bit even more in depth of how a combat round looks. So there's a lot to learn in terms of getting the flow, but once you get the flow, it's not that bad. And I'm getting to the point where I'm hopefully comfortable enough to play it live. The thing when I say it's not that bad, I love it. I think it's fantastic. I think it's really well fleshed out. It's just that you got to just accept that the first few times you're doing it, you're gonna have to check some notes and you're gonna have to look at a flow chart. And then once you do it, like if you play this game a ton, just like with think of any board game that has a lot of crunchiness and depth to it, the rules come as you actively play the game. So this game, I think, has a great balance of allowing it to feel super crunchy and fun and interesting and engaging. There's also a very rules light version where you could dumb this down. I don't mean in a bad way, but you could make it so that it's easy for even they said for even young people, for kids, if you wanted to make the rules super light and easy, there is a version for that, for everybody's taste. So you can take the rules light version and still enjoy this game, or you can kind of go through those, sort of gnarly looking flowcharts. But it really, like I said, isn't that bad when you spend time, doing this over and over in the dungeon. You'll get there. So the camp worksheet, this is another thing when you're trying to recover some health, and then you want to craft some supplies and you want to do this and that. Well, you're going to have to, the more you try and do, the more exhausted you get, first of all. And then of course, the more you try to do, the harder your camp roll whether you're successful or not is. So there's a lot, because when you're trying to camp thematically in the game, and of course I'm excited to share some like these random things I built. This used to have a light switch on it. It was a little candle, and I somehow, man, I was so weird and creative that I did this. This was years ago, but you could turn on the light of this campfire. It's dead now. The battery's dead. But yeah, when you set up camp, I'm just so excited to show that. You get to do like some camping activities, and so it's really cool because there's obviously a balance between how much you can do and the chances that you have to barricade the room so that as you're camping and trying to get things done, that some enemies don't wander in. Thematically, that's sort of the idea behind camping, right? So the more you try and accomplish, the more tired you'd be at camp, because you're trying to build bandages and build oil and torches, so you're going to get more exhausted, and exhausted has its own downsides. So there's this fun little balance in the game of trying to make it through the dungeon, and how much do you want to try and gamble that you can do at a certain rest point. Super freaking cool. More just flow sheets. I think these are still things that I reference enough where if I want to quickly just look at the rules on a flow sheet, it's easier than flipping through the book sometimes to have it visually laid out by these kind people that have, for example, summarized combat roles, and you can quickly look at a spreadsheet on how your rolls landed. And then the tables from the book have been printed out and shared to be printed out by Alex in his zipped document from the PDF, so you have quick access to, again, you don't always have to flip through the book to find the page. You can just say, hey, I know I have that. And there's also a page that shows you how to draw each room. So when you roll on the D100 table, each room will have a certain number of entrances and exits and doors, and it'll generate your map. So you can see here I rolled a few different types of rooms already. And this is really cool and exciting because you have to kind of wander through the dungeon to find the exit, and your map's going to look different every time. And the reason that's important is because there might be, if there's access to like this many doors, you'll have the chance to kind of go off in one direction if that door is unlocked, but say you get unlucky and all these doors are locked. Well, then you don't have to worry about unlocking this door. Just start going through the door that's unlocked if you want to make it easier for yourself. But then other rooms might just have one entrance that you came through and one you're trying to get out of. And then you're forced, if this door rolls locked, well, you got to start, dealing with the locked door, whether that's trying to pick the lock, or which of course comes with a skill check, or trying to bash down the door, which comes with an athletics skill check. So very fun and creative way to generate your own maps for this world. And there's different rules on if you want to use pre-generated dungeons, how to roll for how many doors there are if the dungeon map you're using doesn't already signify doors. But there's a lot of ways to play the game. And these are more tables got mixed up. I think my map table got mixed up with some encounters and combat tables. So we've come to the end of my paperwork here. And yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to share with everybody on this video, is what this game sort of feels as like a big picture. And my hope is to play through like maybe an hour of gameplay and record that. I haven't quite decided how. The first one might be a little bit not perfect. I don't think my rules understanding and my knowledge is still kind of, I'm picking up the game, but I'm getting there to where I won't have to do a ton of flipping back and forth on the different flow sheets and notes and tables. So, well, we always have to flip on the tables to see what happens, but hopefully I can make it a smooth enough experience that anyone who's interested in seeing how a few encounters and events look like, and how crawling through this dungeon is going to feel, we'll get an idea of how the game loop plays. So anyway, thank you all for checking this out, and go check out Alex's page, Black Oath Entertainment. And happy gaming. May all your dice rolls be blessed and all your card draws be blessed, and wishing you a great week and day ahead.